Greetings, fellow adventurers of the supernatural. Paranormal M invites you to join us on a quest for truth behind the inexplicable. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications to stay updated on our latest chilling tales. Let's embark on this journey together. Ask Reddit. I studied abroad in Rome, Italy, when I was 22. I lived on the 7th floor of an apartment building with 6 girls. One of them who was my best friend and stayed in the same room as me. My parents came to visit me during spring break. This doesn't add much to the story, but it is pretty important. I am an extremely light sleeper, and my roommate snored pretty loud, so I slept with earplugs in almost every night. One night during that spring break week, I was dead asleep, and in my dream I felt someone grabbing my foot. I woke up and thought it was my roommate messing with me, but didn't open my eyes, and I just said her name and told her to knock it off. It stopped for a couple of minutes, but then started again. It felt like somebody was pinching the ball of my foot, like trying to get a better grip on it. I woke up again, pissed off, because I thought it was my roommate again, but when I looked, she was dead asleep. I looked down at the bottom of the bed and saw a full-bodied person standing there. I yanked my foot back, and they just walked out of the room. I wasn't really as scared as I thought, but I was wide awake and just very in shock. The weirdest part was that one of my parents' flight back to the U.S., my mom told me that she sat next to a psychic medium. They told her how she really loved Rome, but one thing that she noticed was how many spirits were around, especially in the Colosseum and places like that. She couldn't even go near them because it was so overwhelming. And then she told my mom, "This is going to sound weird, but somebody dead is trying to contact your family or someone in your family." I'm pretty indifferent on how much I believe or don't believe in psychic mediums, but I did think it was pretty freaky. I used a Ouija board when I was younger. So I'm 45 now. I was thinking about this randomly, and I was bored and decided to ask if anybody had an experience with the board. Like a real experience. I'm actually afraid to talk about it. I was 12 when I first started using one by myself. It started moving just fine. I became obsessed with it and used it regularly for about a year and a half. There was a name. When I asked someone I was talking to, it would say Bobby Mihalovich. I'm not sure of the spelling of his last name, so I don't know. You would think you would know the spelling, but perhaps not the pronunciation. All I know is I'm afraid to talk about it because I did it by myself for a few years, and I can still remember that it was moving on its own. I would even try and trick it sometimes and just kind of lift my fingers off the planchette and it would continue to move for about an inch before stopping. One time, it even levitated while I was using it with my brother and friend. You could feel the pressure of the plastic pushing on our fingers upward, and you could pull away when it got just a few inches in the air. But I'm mostly concerned with my own experiences and using it by myself. I mean, I used to come home from school and just hop on the board like no big deal. No one told me it was fake or demonic, I just thought it worked. It felt creepy but natural at the same time. What I'm telling you is the truth. I saw, felt, and it moved. I talked to this thing for hours. I was old enough to know that it was, well, you would think I would be old enough to know it was fake or bogus, so I see a lot of people telling stories about the board, but I don't believe them because if you really had used one the way I did, you wouldn't want to talk about it. Until now, anyway. Anything else out there, do this. Bobby Mihalovich. Not sure of the pronunciation myself. Is it just grief? Am I losing my grip on reality? That being said, my daughter's father died a few days ago. I loved this man with every fiber in my being. My daughter was the definition of a daddy's girl. She changed my life. She was the center of his world. I don't know if any of that matters, but who knows? Anyway, it's been a long 4 days, and I've Googled 100 different things relating to connecting with the dead in one way or another. Because yes, I'm grieving. My daughter is 3. I don't think she's grasped what's going on. She's her same happy self, and we've read a bunch of age-appropriate books about the subject. Talked about Daddy being dead, gone, and no longer here. She kind of says, "Oh, Daddy gone," really sad, and moves on to something else quickly. Today we were in his apartment where he died. I took my daughter to the park, and we used to play there right after. And as I opened my car door to let her out, I swear I could smell his cologne. It was as if he was standing right next to me. It was so strong. It felt like he had been with us at some point, and I don't know how to explain the feeling. I went to another playground this evening, and shortly before we headed out, my daughter went screaming, "Daddy, ghost! Daddy, ghost!" and then started running as if she was chasing someone and yelled, "Daddy, ghost, go down slide!" and then made me go down the slide with her. I didn't even know she knew the word ghost or what it meant. She's autistic and just started developing some speech. Humming in the woods of Appalachia. I want to start this off by saying that I was born and raised in Appalachia, and I'm very open to the paranormal. I've had several experiences in my life, but this one has kept me wondering what it could have been for almost the past 24 hours. Yesterday around noon, I was with my husband in the woods of Appalachia. He was fishing at the lake, and I sat about 10 feet back in the tree line to have a little more protection from the wind, so I could read a book. Occasionally I would stop reading whenever I heard rustling or birds, because I also like to bird watch. I looked around with my binoculars, and I really never did see anything. Then I started hearing sounds of a woman humming a song. It sounded like she was very close to me, but there were no sounds of the leaves rustling in the ground from someone walking by us or the path. At first, I looked around just to make sure I wasn't in someone's way, but that's when I realized I wasn't hearing footsteps. I started to look in my binoculars, but I got too scared. Luckily, at that point, my husband decided to pack it in because the lake seemed to be fished out. As I was gathering my things, and just this humming sounded like it was getting closer, and I could feel eyes on me. I've never walked so fast out of the woods in my life. When we got back to the car, I told my husband about it, but he didn't hear the humming. He's also very skeptical of the paranormal and tries to explain things away. All of this to say, does anybody have an idea of what this could have been? What did I see in Albania? During the Second World War, Albania was occupied by the Nazis. After the Second World War, Albania decided the best way to fend off fascism in the future was to become communist and isolationist. They closed their borders in 1946 and declared themselves the world's first atheist nation in 1967. Religion was outlawed in 1967, and religious buildings were repurposed or destroyed. Previously, Albania was a mix of primarily Catholicism and Islam. And just because it's not legal doesn't mean a person will stop practicing their faith. Catholics were seen as a special threat due to a perceived loyalty to the Holy See of the state. Shkodër, A city in northern Albania housed a prison that held the tortured practitioners of Catholicism. Many people died there when they refused to give up fellow practitioners under extreme forms of torture. This prison is now part of a museum called the Site of Witness and Memory. The first part details the events leading up to and following the outlawing of the religion by Enver Hoxha. The second part details what went on in the prison. At the end, you're permitted to walk into the prison and into its cells. At the bottom floor, some cells display prominent people who were held there in resistance in the face of the concentration camp. Others display anti-religious propaganda, and some tell stories of camp conditions and how information was shared throughout the camp. Most of the cells are empty, but you can walk inside of them. Each measures about 5 feet by 5 feet. The last room is much larger. That's where the inmates were brought for questioning. The original desk, original typewriter, and telephone are all in there, as well as a chair where the inmates would have sat. There's a second story to this prison. I went upstairs to check it out, but all of the cells were empty. To be sure I didn't miss anything, I poked my head into each one and made my way down the hallway. Once I was sure the cells were empty, I began to walk back down the downstairs. Out of the corner of my eye in one of the cells, I catch a black figure. I caught a surprising amount of detail for only catching a glance. It was about 5'6", emaciated, standing head against the corner, hands in its face and facing away from me, pure black. Had shadows spreading out from it. At first I thought it was a cardboard cutout I'd missed, so I took a couple steps back to check. The room was empty. I was overtaken by a sense of pure fear. I wasn't in any danger, but I don't think I was ever that scared before. I ran out of that museum, and I'm sure I got a couple odd looks from security and other attendees. I haven't been able to shake what I saw. I don't think I believe in the paranormal, but I also have no explanation as to what I saw. It looked and felt real. Came across the subreddit and thought you guys might have answers. Sorry for the long post and maybe the over-explained background. My grandma's house. This happened to my late aunt, circa 8 to 9 years ago. My Aunt Rose, then in her late 50s, lived alone since the death of my grandma in 2004. She's lived in her room for all her life. She never married, never had kids. The house she lived in was newly renovated in 2012 because the old 1960s house was falling apart. The turning point was when the ceilings dropped into my aunt's bedroom while my aunt was away. Thankfully, it didn't happen when she's asleep. The house used to house 2 big families with maids. At its glorious time, it was housing 16 people. My great-grandma, grandpa, grandma, cousin of my grandpa, my aunt, uncle, dad, and little aunt, among others. One by one, the people moved out or passing in the house. But, well, the house was almost fully renovated, but still preserving the room and layout of the old house. There have been countless, just tons of paranormal things related to, well, my aunt, and she's not the type of person who freaked out easily. Among others, slightly moved furniture, makeup kits, listening to people breathing on their ears or some giggling, until seeing big non-human heads outside her window. But that was apparently considered as normal in my country. Until the last one happened. One normal day, my aunt just entered her own room after work. She got pushed hard toward the wall. Her left shoulder hit another furniture, a sturdy 100-year-old teak cabinet made by my great-grandpa. She fell down. She was taken aback and got mad and yelled at the unknown. "Hey, I know you live here, but I live here first before you. Let's just be civil and don't disturb each other. The thing is, my aunt knew that there was another, a being living in her room. A lady with long hair, usually only sitting under the ceiling behind the door of her room. Believe it or not, but it's according to some people who can see. I'm taking it with a grain of salt. But the aftermath of the incident was clear. My aunt got hurt. She's unable to raise her arm past her shoulder anymore after that incident. The reason why she told us was only because she's complaining about her arm, not about the paranormal experience. The ghost, whoever that was, has won. My aunt passed away on the porch. It was in 2017 of a heart attack. The house is now empty. Dead neighbor who let us know he was okay. When I was around 9, my mother and I had a routine of going to the cinema every Saturday. There would always be a movie showing at 12 p.m., meaning that we would always return home by 3. As we reached our front door, my neighbor, a 70-something-year-old man with glasses and his usual red-brown jacket, walked past. We said our usual, "Hey, how are yous?" in which he responded, "Well, I'm okay, I'm just heading into town for some shopping." A few hours later, we were informed by our other neighbor's close friend who visited often that he'd been found dead on the kitchen floor at approximately 10 a.m. this morning. I was very shocked and, well, all of us. He appeared to us hours after he had passed. As I'm older, I keep thinking about how the neighbor who had found him was an old lady and couldn't have gotten the times mixed up, maybe. But still, we had seen him in the afternoon, which is hours apart, as well as the fact that he was on his way to town, which adds another 2 hours before he'd be home. He looked like any other person where we saw him, nothing ghostly about it. My mom strongly believes that what we saw was a ghost coming to let us know he was okay. I'm interested to know if anybody's heard or experienced something similar. Seeing shit? ? Okay, let me know if you want to hear any more of my encounters, or whatever you'd like to call it. I was about 10 at the time, and here's some background information about the people I'll talk about. And I'll also add some background information on my old house very briefly. The previous owner of the house was abusive to his kids, and an addict. And there is a murder in the backyard, a little 7-year-old boy. I don't know much of the story for that one, but that's just an event I know happened there previously. So my mom has had a lot of disabilities and is always in immense pain. And about 5 years ago, she finally got on cannabis oil to help the pain, which had helped her a lot more than she thought it would have. Only other person I'll bring up that's got something to deal with this encounter is my brother, who would have been only about 4.5 months old. One night my baby brother had gotten sick, bad, wasn't breathing well. And a mother being a mom, she forced herself to just try to get ready to take him to the hospital, and my mom was too tired and in pain to make bottles for him for the trip, So I had offered, of course, and FYI, all of the lights in the house were off. We're walking from Mom's room to the kitchen. Very open, modern, mansion-style house. Walking to the kitchen, I heard a voice say in the distance, oh so clearly, "Who is this?" It almost made me kind of quietly, literally piss myself. Sounded more like a little girl than a boy, but just what I heard. Struggling to find a light, scared, and found it, and I shit you not. Whole minute looked for that switch, shitting myself. Play it off as I didn't really want to hear anything, and I just go get these 3 little bottles together and their, lids and shit. I set it out on the counter and washed them all. As I was just drying the lids, one of the other lids started moving, and I stayed frozen like I was paralyzed. Typing this out right now is just making this scene repeat over and over in my head, sending shivers down my spine. I finally talked and said, "Stop." Next, millisecond or two bottles flew out of the countertop and I screamed so loud. Ran to Mom's room and she got up and helped get the bottles, not wanting to go near them. Then the little one started screaming in horror. Mom shitting herself from what I said, and then the baby randomly screaming like something horrible happened. We could still hear that he couldn't breathe properly and fled out the door, and we all just hopped in the car and drove him to the hospital. We were yell-talking about what the fuck just happened. Angry Ghost. What I'm going to tell you is all probably a bit too unbelievable to point, but you might not even think it's true, and I saw this page on Reddit and I had to join. I've had one too many experiences, and I'm wanting to share what happened and seeing if anybody's been through similar things. This happened around 5 years ago. It occurred at my grandmother's house. I don't particularly get along with my Nan. Never really have, even when I was really young, so I'd never talk to her when my mom took me there. Which was really rare because I'd throw a tanty if, I knew I was going to go there. And even now I would. Nan's house was most definitely haunted. No doubt in my mind some crazy stuff goes down there. And that's before her and her house felt always cold and unsafe. Mom had taken me there after a doctor's appointment once. The house was small and really old. Really only my uncle and Nan lived there together. Mom had paperwork online to fill out. Meanwhile, me and my Nan were in the lounge doing our best, pretty much ignoring each other's existence. Mom was at the dinner table grabbing her laptop and, she's had that since she was 16. Mom was doing her own thing, and then Nan started talking to her about some drama with my auntie, and then Nan started treating Mom like shit. Like she's done to my mom her whole childhood, really. 5 minutes after her screaming, there was a loud slam. It was the door that goes to the laundry from the kitchen. No one saw, but we all heard it. And there was this weird feeling, like a vibe that someone or something was pissed off. We ignored the bang from the door as there was a window open that slammed the door shut. Suddenly, my mom's laptop went fucking flying across the room. All of us were just shitting ourselves, and it didn't smash or anything, it just stopped working. She even tried getting it fixed after all of this, and they said there's nothing wrong, but it just wouldn't turn on. Still now she holds on to it. Not sure why, like it doesn't work. My uncle then wakes up from the laptop being thrown, and he said something along the lines of, "Mom, why the fuck is the plant pot in the room tipped over and everyone's screaming like somebody died horrifically?" Horrifically. And we tell him everything, and I've only been in that house about 3 times since then. She moved out about 3 months ago, and I reckon the house needs to be bulldozed. Shadow Man. This happened when I was from around 8 to 10. Maybe as back as when I was living with my mom. I was about to go to bed after my mom and stepdad said their goodnights. It was fairly late at night. An important part of this is to know that I had kind of like a fairy light on the bed. And some of this on my window to kind of help me sleep. I was facing the wall of my bedroom before turning over and opening my eyes because I felt weird and I wanted to check what was behind me. And there stood a tall shadow-like figure that was nearly touching my ceiling. Obviously, since I was scared, I just stared at it and didn't break eye contact with it because I was just scared. I was scared what it would do if I closed my eyes, even for a second. I slowly just watched it evaporate like some fog on the spot. The scarier part is when I told my parents the next day, my stepdad said he was in the garden, and because my room's facing the garden, he could see my window. He said that he saw some shadow figure standing, and because of the kind of fairy lights, we both knew that the two of us couldn't accidentally see the same thing at the same time of night. I'm not accustomed to hearing the word fairy light, which I'm assuming means nightlight. I like it. I don't even know what it was. When I was living in my dad's old bedroom apartment, I had to sleep in the living room that was connected to the kitchen. I slept on a foldable couch. After a few weeks, maybe months of living with my dad, I started hearing a weird clapping noise that came from the kitchen when I was alone. Never when someone else was around, though. After some time, I got used to it and started to check what it was and thought it might be the fridge, since it was a bit broken. So I thought it was a coincidence and it happened when it was only me. But I woke up in the morning at night, and after falling asleep on the couch, I woke up to the clapping sound again. And since I was a child, I obviously got startled, so I panicked and just kept my eyes closed, and, well, whatever was there didn't know I was awake. The noise became louder and louder. I started to panic even more, and I saw something move across. It moved across me. That was since I was facing the TV in the living room. The sound casually started to move its way to where my dad's room was. Because I was still new to the living, situation with my dad, I was too scared to go to him and say that I was too scared to sleep because of the noise. But because my brother was in the room with my dad, I started to worry about him, since my dad was a heavy sleeper. When I opened my eyes, the noise still was there, but it stopped the moment I got off the couch and went to my dad. But in the morning, when I told him, he said that, well, he didn't hear anything. Sleeping in the room of my partner's murdered cousin. Before I met my partner, she had a cousin who was murdered by her abusive ex-boyfriend. When visiting her aunt's house, I reluctantly agreed to stay in her cousin's room for the night. Every year they go to a national park to celebrate her life and, well, wish her spirit well. My partner's older cousin and half-older brother of the girl told her that some unexplained things have happened in the house regarding her spirit. I dismissed these as, her older cousin is a bit of a conspiracy theorist. He's a very smart guy and successful programmer, but I genuinely think he accepts strange ideas too easily. Anyway, the first night we fall asleep in the room, which, by the way, is exactly as she left it 4 to 5 years ago, I wake up in the middle of the night to the blanket being slowly pulled off the bed. But it wasn't aggressive or threatening, it was just slowly falling near the edge of the bed. I tried putting it back and was successful, but took way more strength than I thought it would. Even though I was half asleep, sometimes I wonder how the feeling of the weight of the blanket was possible. It was like someone was dragging the blanket underneath the bed, or it just felt like something was like 20 pounds of weight on top of the blanket. I cleared downward force while I pulled it back. I wasn't scared, but something just tells me it was some kind of message. Something along the lines of, "You better treat your girl right because her family supports her," kind of a thing. I fell back asleep and honestly didn't think of the rest of the trip. Mo. It wasn't me, I promise. A little background information about me. I'm a first-generation high school and college graduate. My mother died in a car accident when I was 15. And to me, finishing school and moving on to pursuing a degree in college is what she would have wanted. I wrote a scholarship essay about what it meant to be an entrepreneur. I then was select for a full ride to college of my choice. This is when I joined Juniata College from 2002 to 2006. I made so many friends and had so many fond experiences in those 4 years that it's truly something I would never forget. I was into music and theater and participated in jazz band as a saxophone player, and I played the saxophone since 2nd grade. I was very much into becoming the next Johnny Coltrane. And yeah, anyway, The night of the incident was mid-January 2005. The theater show that I was involved in kind of got out late that evening. I ran sound for the stage, and I had a late-night show. The night I was wearing all black. I left the theater from the back and walked up the music practice building. It was an old converted house that was typically open late to accommodate students that needed to practice. So I arrived and it was still open. That night I was practicing the tenor saxophone solo to Buddy Rich's Channel 1 suite. I know that song. The time went by and the lights were motion detection, so I went and just everything went dark. Got up so that the sensor could turn the lights back on. My mother always told me I was a bit clairvoyant, as all moms would say to their children, right? Well, I sat back down and I immediately had a feeling wash over me like I was being watched. So I paused the music in the disc player, stopped playing. At the same time, the security guard popped into the building and said, "The building is closed for the night. Wrap up." So at that point, I was already done, and I packed up in less than a few minutes. I said goodnight to the security guard as I'm walking into the night with my saxophone case. I feel the snow on my hair, and everything's covered in snow all around me. My dorm was across campus, for those of you who know, Juniata's campus, to know that South Hall is kind of nearest to the football field and event hall. As I'm getting ready to trek through the snow, I see someone by the library, which is on my right. The snow was lightly falling, and I see the back of the person. They were wearing a snow cap and the coat very appropriate for the weather. I didn't think much of them, you see, students walking across campus all the time, so I kept walking toward my dorm. As this person got to one of the street light fixtures by the library, they turned around and said, "Mo, it wasn't me, I promise." I then said, "Well, what do you mean, Megan? Is that you?" All the while I'm thinking it was my friend Megan who lived in South Hall. "Oh, never mind," she replied. Also, my name is Muhammad. My good friends also call me Mo, so I'm just kind of convinced that I know this person. Although I couldn't make out a face, they started to walk toward Cloister. Now, a bit of backstory. Cloister's the oldest dorm on campus, and I heard that a lot of strange occurrences happened at that particular dorm. I played ultimate frisbee, which required lots of running. I was in pretty decent shape. I was a mere 10 or 15 feet away from her when that's when I said, "Hey, wait up, Megan, let's walk together." I did have a slight crush on her, so I wanted to spend some time getting to know her a bit. The strangest part about this initial encounter is that, she was walking and I was hustling. Couldn't keep up with her. At the time I was nearly 3 feet away from her, she turned to look at me as she passed through the archway, and I still couldn't make out a face. A split second after she made her way into the arch, I was right behind her at this point. I turn into the arch and there's no one to be seen, just silence. When I realized what had happened, I ran to my dorm, the best I could without falling in the snow, bolted upstairs only to find my friend Megan. I grasped her by the shoulders and said, "Please tell me you were just outside fucking with me." She responded, "No way, man, it's too cold out there. You look like you've seen a ghost. Are you okay?" I let go of her and backed away. I didn't say a word. At this time, Google's really starting to solidify itself as the best place to search for information. So instead of asking Jeeves or going to Dogpile, I went to Google. For some strange reason, I typed in what that girl said to me. So I went to the search engine and typed in, "Mo, it wasn't me, I promise." What I found chilled me to the core, shocked me so much, couldn't form words to tell my roommate at the time. I scrolled through the search and found a blog post titled, "There's a guy that's playing the saxophone at 3 a.m. in the morning and he won't shut up." Go to the post and there's an anonymous response that read, "Mo, it wasn't me, I promise." Oof. Mo, it wasn't me, I promise. A little background information about me. I'm a first-generation high school and college graduate. My mother died in a car accident when I was 15. And to me, finishing school and moving on to pursuing a degree in college is what she would have wanted. I wrote a scholarship essay about what it meant to be an entrepreneur. I then was select for a full ride to college of my choice. This is when I joined Juniata College from 2002 to 2006. I made so many friends and had so many fond experiences in those 4 years that it's truly something I would never forget. I was into music and theater and participated in jazz band as a saxophone player, and I played the saxophone since 2nd grade. I was very much into becoming the next Johnny Coltrane. And yeah, anyway, the night of the incident was mid-January 2005. The theater show that I was involved in kind of got out late that evening. I ran sound for the stage, and I had a late-night show. The night I was wearing all black. I left the theater from the back and walked up the music practice building. It was an old converted house that was typically open late to accommodate students that needed to practice. So I arrived and it was still open. That night I was practicing the tenor saxophone solo to Buddy Rich's Channel 1 suite. I know that song. The time went by and the lights were motion detection, so I went and just everything went dark. Got up so that the sensor could turn the lights back on. My mother always told me I was a bit clairvoyant, as all moms would say to their children, right? Well, I sat back down and I immediately had a feeling wash over me like I was being watched. So I paused the music in the disc player, stopped playing. At the same time, the security guard popped into the building and said, "The building is closed for the night. Wrap up." So at that point, I was already done, and I packed up in less than a few minutes. I said goodnight to the security guard as I'm walking into the night with my saxophone case. I feel the snow on my hair, and everything's covered in snow all around me. My dorm was across campus, for those of you who know, Juniata's campus, to know that South Hall is kind of nearest to the football field and event hall. As I'm getting ready to trek through the snow, I see someone by the library, which is on my right. The snow was lightly falling, and I see the back of the person. They were wearing a snow cap and the coat very appropriate for the weather. I didn't think much of them, you see, students walking across campus all the time, so I kept walking toward my dorm. As this person got to one of the street light fixtures by the library, they turned around and said, "Mo, it wasn't me, I promise." I then said, "Well, what do you mean, Megan? Is that you?" All the while I'm thinking it was my friend Megan who lived in South Hall. "Oh, never mind," she replied. Also, my name is Muhammad, and my good friends also call me Mo, so I'm just kind of convinced that I know this person. Although I couldn't make out a face, they started to walk toward Cloister. Now, a bit of backstory. Cloister's the oldest dorm on campus, and I heard that a lot of strange occurrences happened at that particular dorm. I played ultimate frisbee, which required lots of running. I was in pretty decent shape. I was a mere 10 or 15 feet away from her when that's when I said, "Hey, wait up, Megan, let's walk together." I did have a slight crush on her, so I wanted to spend some time getting to know her a bit. The strangest part about this initial encounter is that, she was walking and I was hustling. Couldn't keep up with her. By the time I was nearly 3 feet away from her, she turned to look at me as she passed through the archway, and I still couldn't make out a face. A split second after she made her way into the arch, I was right behind her at this point. I turn into the arch and there's no one to be seen, just silence. When I realized what had happened, I ran to my dorm, and best I could without falling in the snow, bolted upstairs only to find my friend Megan. I grasped her by the shoulders and said, "Please tell me you were just outside fucking with me." She responded, "No way, man, it's too cold out there. You look like you've seen a ghost. Are you okay?" I let go of her and backed away. I didn't say a word. At this time, Google's really starting to solidify itself as the best place to search for information. So instead of asking Jeeves or going to Dogpile, I went to Google. For some strange reason, I typed in what that girl said to me. So I went to the search engine and typed in, "Mo, it wasn't me, I promise." What I found chilled me to the core, shocked me so much, couldn't form words to tell my roommate at the time. I scrolled through the search and found a blog post titled, "There's a guy that's playing the saxophone at 3 a.m. in the morning and he won't shut up." Go to the post and there's an anonymous response that read, "Mo, it wasn't me, I promise." Oof. The Girl in the Paddock. Back in my teens, I was outside in the yard one day when I saw movement in the nearby paddock. Turning to look, I saw what appeared to be a girl of about 10 or so years old running across the paddock toward the road, only she was in black and white. When I turned to my companion, the family dog, I saw her looking at the same exact spot I'd just been looking. She was interested in something there, as if she too could see the ghost of the girl. Interestingly, there used to be a house in that paddock many, many years ago, but the family moved to another town before a house was built. In the years since, I've never seen the ghost again, but some flowers sprung up one year in the paddock, bulbs of some description, all in a row as if they used to belong to a garden that was planted there. I often wonder who the girl was, and if she might have lived in the house that once stood at that paddock. I've also searched the local cemetery for anybody around that age who might have passed away. Didn't find anyone. However, a neighboring property has a couple of graves from a long time ago belonging to a sadly deceased baby of the people who lived there at the time. But I think this girl would have been far too old to be buried that way. There's no grave visible, in any case. Unlike on that other property, there is a hospital not too far away. And sometime around the turn of last century, at least I gather, however, though I don't think the building is there anymore, local accounts vary. I'll probably never know if I truly saw a spirit or not, and who it was if I did. But it is certainly an interesting thing to think about upon occasion. Country roads. This happened in Victoria, Australia. It was presumably a hot summer that year, and we packed into the family van with Dad driving. We were off to the lake. Since it was shorter and more scenic, Dad decided to take a brick, or rather a back road, rather than go to the asphalt. Sitting in the back seat with a book as usual, I looked up to watch the scenery as the trees zipped by and the remnant vegetation turned into paddocks. Dust rose up behind the van, and we turned into another dusty road. We were almost at the lake now. You could never drive on these roads in the winter unless you had a four-wheel drive or similar vehicle because the rain would make them boggy and you'd slip and slide and all that stuff. You know, that stuff you just don't want. But when it was dry, the road was fine. It still wasn't a good idea to go too far off-road onto the side of the road. You could fall in a ditch or get stuck, but generally you were safe from getting bogged down. Sometimes you might even see a sheep. A sheep that had somehow escaped its paddock, roaming here. Inside the van, as I watched getting ready to turn away and go back to my book, I saw something following. It was following after the van in the dust, almost bounding after us. And it wasn't a sheep, but it was something. It was the shape of an animal, and it was keeping time with the van, not getting further away or closer. Though we were going fast, and at first I thought it might be something caught underneath the vehicle that was trailing behind. I couldn't see anything connecting whatever it was to the van. Besides, it was quite large, and I think I would have heard it if we'd driven over something, but I hadn't heard anything. Dad hadn't slowed down or swerved or remarked upon running over anything either. I stared at it intently, but I couldn't make out really anything through this dust. It just seemed to be following us. At this point, I got scared and turned around to ask somebody else if they could see the thing too. When I turned back to look again, I could no longer see it. To this day, I have no idea what it was. It still gives me the creeps just thinking about it. In the back of my mind, I kind of wonder if it was some kind of interdimensional creature, or maybe I just watched too much Stargate as a teenager. Whatever the case, I've been down that road again, and I've never seen anything strange or out of the ordinary. I've never seen any odd creatures, or at least any other times either. The odd spirit or two perhaps, but nothing that creeped me out nearly as much as this did. There was just something about how it was following us and how it disappeared and how I could no longer see it on the road that just gets to me, really. Kids. This happened in my home country in the Philippines. It was more than a decade ago, and I still can't forget about it. I went to my girlfriend's house late in the afternoon to hang out and surprise her. The moment I arrived, I noticed that their car wasn't in the driveway, so I texted her where she was. She said the whole family's out and they'll be back before 6. So when I was about to leave, I saw some movements behind their windows, so I texted her again if her siblings were left at the home, and she said nobody's at home, and I told her I can literally see 2 kids looking outside the window. She told me to go home because those aren't her siblings, but something else. So I was about to run when I heard kids' voices asking me, "Are you going home?" They also said, "Take care," and up till now it sends chills, giving me chicken skin. I like that way of saying goosebumps. Giving me chicken skin. I like that. Kids' second part. After months had passed, my girlfriend asked me to come over, and I told her I can't stay or even come inside their house with what I've experienced. She guaranteed me that those things are harmless, and all I need to do is ignore them and not to show fear. Easier said, right? Well, so I gave in and went there. Right in front of their gated house, there's this force or feeling that pushes me away and saying not to come in. Even writing this is giving me chills already. She went out to open the gate and sat on the couch facing a staircase. She asked me to wait for 15 minutes because she'll change, and that's when things start to get creepy. While she was changing, we were talking about stuff. That's when she went out of her room. Her room's downstairs. She was asking me to check upstairs because she was hearing footsteps. Also, her older brother went to my side of the kitchen. He was prepping lunch. Thinking something's upstairs and it's just the 3 of us that time, that's when I and her brother go to the staircase. The footsteps stopped, so we decided not to go up anymore because we're both scared already that time. So I went back to the couch and her brother to the kitchen. While I was seated, and I felt this cold breeze behind me, so I turned to look and nothing's there, scanning the whole area, and nothing until my gaze caught something at the staircase. I was already frozen standing, and when I slowly panned looking at the staircase, that's when I saw this black shadowy childlike figure seated at the last step. It was just looking at me. Mustering my courage left in me, I ran toward the kitchen shouting "May demonyo" repeatedly in Filipino, dark entity, until I got to my girlfriend's brother, and when we looked back, nothing was there. The whole house became so cold and we could hear 3 knocks repeatedly upstairs. My girlfriend was so scared she turned pale white, and that's when we decided to rush out of the house in the middle of the day. True story. So it all started back in 2018 when I moved into an apartment in New Brunswick. My youngest daughter, who was 2 at the time, had a friend that couldn't see. She described them as having tubes coming from his arms, which sent chills down my spine. When I asked her more about him, she refused to answer and started running out of her room screaming that he wouldn't let her play and that he was in her toy box. One night I heard her talking to somebody named Mackie, telling him not to sing a certain song because it scared her. She even claimed to see him crawling on the walls. I was terrified and knew I had to do something about it. Called someone to come and smudge my place. I was hoping to get rid of whatever presence was haunting my daughter. But in 2022, after moving to a new place, strange things started happening again. My daughter began talking to her friends in the mirror. We had an old-style bathroom mirror that was split into 3 sections. She would open the sides and just talk to her friends in the middle section. It was eerie and unsettling to witness. One day I overheard her saying that she was going to introduce her little sister to her friends in the mirror when she arrived. This sent shivers down my spine, and I knew I had to take action once again. I decided to move once more, hoping to leave whatever was following us behind. The mystery of the unseen friend and the friends in the mirror still haunts me to this day. I can't explain what my daughter was experiencing, but I know that there was something otherworldly at play in those moments. The fear and uncertainty of those times will always stay with me, a reminder of the unknown forces that can lurk in the shadows. My first memory. I rarely think about this since it's literally my first memory, but this might be creepy to you. I've thought about this many times since I was had memory, so I don't think I'm remembering it falsely. It's hard to describe, surprisingly, but I was 3 years old almost certainly. Probably only just 3, since I hadn't moved house yet and it wasn't blisteringly hot yet. My birthday is in the early to mid-May, so it's basically right before summer. I live in the UK. It was likely mid-May or June, 2012. I don't remember what my internal monologue said, but I was standing in the area where the wall would have been between the kitchen and the living room if they weren't connected, facing our sofa. My mom was washing up or cooking. We didn't have a dishwasher until about a year after that in the new house. I must have thought something like, I'm alive now. It was so odd. I sort of felt the urge to shake my head. But it never occurred to me how odd that was. I guess I was young. Remember at that time that prior to that moment I didn't have any memories, but I did have all my functional skills, like I could speak English, I could walk, I recognized stuff. I also knew what my parents probably taught me. I also think that I was 3 at the time purely from gut feeling and the fact that it took ages to walk and talk anyway. That makes sense because I'm a slow learner, but once I understand something, I learn fast. I had a possession nightmare. In this dream, I was at the market near my girlfriend's house. We were walking through the parking lot when I heard something talking to me. This part wasn't clear in my mind after waking up, but I remember fragments. The voice told me that reality was more than this, that we could perceive it through 3 means. The only one I can remember was sound, and in the dream it was as if I could see sound waves transferring from one space to another. Fortunately, I don't remember the others. One point we went to the room where I was sleeping in real life. It's more common for my girlfriend to come to my house than vice versa, so dreaming that I'm in her room is significant. This part was simple. Now the voice was my girlfriend's, and she looked at me and said, "Want to know another way? There's a spirit room in the other room." At that moment the spirit entered me. I laughed in a terrifying way. However, I woke up laughing in the same manner. I experience sleep paralysis very frequently. Whenever I wake up from it, I can't move. But this time I lifted my head a bit and laughed, almost screaming at the same time. My girlfriend grabbed my head and asked if I was okay, and I continued laughing for about 5 seconds. It was a loud, suffocating, restrained laughter. I'm a very calm person and never have reactions out of the ordinary, especially in dreams. I immediately reassured my girlfriend when I returned to myself. But I was very afraid and sweaty after the nightmare. I've never made noise because of a dream before, and this is also the first time. I know it's nothing otherworldly, so to speak, but I wanted some opinions. Occasional disembodied voice in my bedroom. Last night my husband and I were in the dark. We were about to fall asleep when we both hear a very clear whisper-type voice, but it was loud. It said, "What?" You know, like what in a strong whisper sound. Almost had a rasp to it. One other instance, my husband and his friend were doing renovation work at the room when we finished moving in. They were working quietly when they both heard a similar voice. Overall, I don't generally feel like our house is haunted or has spirits hanging out 24/7. We have a dog and small children, and I feel like they'd pick up on it too, right? If we had constant energy with us. We live next directly behind train tracks in another neighborhood, and our bedroom leads out to a deck with a sliding glass door. We hear trains passing all through the night. Maybe a transient ghost gets enough energy juice from the train tracks to pop in every now and then. Bob, back for round 2, or is it something else? Unfortunately, I think Bob has come back to visit. Although it's been a long while since it left, I've noticed a few occurrences that had not happened since last time Bob visited and left. It started about a week ago when I was watching a show, ironically about paranormal investigations in my living room with my mom. My sister comes in, seeming a little bit nervous, and lets me know that the lights in the back bathroom are flickering a lot. I go to check the lights to find that they were no longer flickering, they looked like bad bulbs. So yesterday I pulled the bedroom door open to find a fake bat. You know, the one that hangs from a string that you'd sort of turn the lights of a ceiling fan. The fan wasn't on and briefly spinning and in a different position than it was in the morning. It stopped as soon as the door opened, but this used to happen a lot the first time Bob was there. I've also noticed a lot of things moving in the corners of my vision, mostly when I'm laying down. When I sat down for dinner last night on the floor in my bedroom, a small canvas that I had leaned up against my desk fell over. Please note that the canvas had been there for at least a month and hadn't fallen over before. The part of the desk it was leaned against had drawers and was therefore flat like a wall. True events and why I think I might be sensitive to the paranormal. My parents had a dog named Libby. When I was born, the dog basically took claim on me. She would sleep under my crib, and they were pretty much overly protective any time a new person came to visit. I would lay on her and read books to her, even though the book was upside down and my words were nonsense. Unfortunately, when I was 3, we had to put Libby down due to cancer in her bones. It had already spread everywhere. And from then on, I would constantly talk to myself and my mom would brush it off as an imaginary friend. That is until I was about 5. My mom had just come in from dropping my sister off from daycare. Asked who I was talking to. I responded with words that made her pause. I had pointed next to me and said, "I was talking to Libby. She came and told me I wouldn't need her anymore." My mom didn't believe me and asked what she looked like. I told her exactly. Even though I wouldn't have been old enough to have memories before she was gone, my mom cried that day. To this day, I think Libby is either a spirit guide or a guardian angel type situation. I've constantly found pure white down feathers, and only once in an actual small feather. It was like at camp, and I was at a counselor, and they wouldn't let me keep it. Even though I picked up every down feather I found, I can't find more than 1 or 2. I have a feather collection, so I keep them all in one spot, not scattered. It didn't stop there. Also, at the age of around 5, I became unable to sleep since one of the electronic dolls in my closet wouldn't stop talking. I called my mom in and she removed the batteries only to find it still talking. My mom became weirded out and threw the doll away. Another incident, also at the age of 5, I called my mother into my room to tell her I couldn't sleep since Barbies were being too loud. By the way, they're not electronic. So since then, mostly in class, I would think I heard somebody say my name. On rare occasions, my friend would turn to face me and ask if I called them. I had not. This only progressed until one night where my friend and I were having a sleepover. As we stayed up late, we noticed the door to my room kept opening right in front of our eyes. I've since then called the spirit Bob. We brushed it off and went to bed even though my parents were already asleep and my sister's at a friend's house. I checked and made sure my parents weren't awake. I slept throughout the whole night, but my friend woke up 4+ times to her name being called. She thought it was me, but I was out like a rock. Stuff used to move only minorly, or when I wasn't in the room, and it eventually stopped for good. That is, until recently. Though it only stopped a year ago, I've noticed small habits of Bob returning. Small movements that have not bothered me until recently when we've been noticeably having an excessive amount of movement in the corner of my eye. Last week at school, I've twice heard my name being called while walking to my next class. I looked over and nobody was trying to get my attention. This could have been another person talking to a friend, but I feel it's worth noting. Gettysburg experience as a child. Town all gray. I hated it. I know there are a lot of posts about Gettysburg, but I figured I'd add my own. I visited Gettysburg when I was 10. My father and 2 older brothers were crazy about anything related to the Civil War. They considered Gettysburg to be some kind of Civil War mecca. I had no strong interest in it myself. I loved history, but I found my brother's obsession with the Civil War to be tiresome. Like I know how important it is, but they acted like the world stopped for it, which it didn't. Sort of did there, but yeah. Historically speaking, it just wasn't my thing. It was July of 1976. We were staying in Lancaster and drove there. Pretty much as soon as we entered town, everything in my vision went gray. Like the colors had been muted. Not black and white and gray, just hazy gray. As if the day had suddenly gotten overcast. But I recall it actually being very sunny out. I remember looking out the farm fields on our way there and how nice it looked, but soon after entering Gettysburg, it all went gray and hazy-like. I got very, very anxious, sick to my stomach. Not like I was going to throw up, just slightly nauseous. My parents weren't the most patient people at the time, so I kept my feeling to myself. Everywhere we went, it was all grayed out, like colors had been drained out. We toured a few spots and I couldn't stop feeling just afraid out, scared. Couldn't understand what was going on. We went to this one place that had these dioramas that depicted all the events of the Battle of Gettysburg. At some point I got really nauseous and terrified. I don't know why I told my mother that I had to go outside. She came out and asked me if I was okay. I just lied and told her that it was the heat. What I really wanted to do was get in the car and get out of there fast. Then the worst thing. I don't remember exactly where we were, but I remember it being a big park. It might have been the cemetery or something, but I don't recall. All I remember was waking up a slight incline on a paved path. Then our group turned and walked across the grass, and I could not walk. Couldn't bring myself to walk on it. Like there was this terrible feeling of violating something. Remember, I'm 10 years old and I didn't know much of the details of the battle. I just knew that I couldn't walk across the grass. My father, not the most patient guy, saw me hesitating. I remember him asking, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "I can't walk here. It's like I'd be walking on dead bodies." Thankfully, my mother saw me and told me to wait where I was. I remember trying not to look anywhere. I just kept pacing around on the path. Finally, they got back and we left that place. Stayed for a couple more hours, and I couldn't wait to get out of that town. Just 5 years ago, I was relating my experience in Gettysburg with my friend George. I'd not mentioned that I thought everything was kind of gray to him yet, just that I couldn't walk on the grass. He told me that there were mass graves there, and, well, I'd have been walking on dead bodies. His wife was something of a self-proclaimed psychic of some sort. She's a little out there, but she's a nice person. She overheard my story and interrupted to ask, "Did everything look gray to you?" Honestly, I was so shocked, but also relieved, like I was validated. She claimed that when they've gone to Gettysburg, she sees soldiers everywhere. She said that she saw them marching up a hill at some point. Anyway, that's my Gettysburg story. I didn't see any ghosts, but I think I experienced some kind of feeling, or an awareness. Besides the gray vision, it was this eerie sense of anxiety and dread that I recall. Interestingly, there have been other places where I felt this. One of them is the Lower East Side of Manhattan. I avoid that neighborhood like crazy, especially the areas around the Bowery. Kinda know what you mean. Lavallette, New Jersey, 1969. Child Ghost Playmate. When I was 3 years old in 1969, my parents rented a bungalow beach house in Lavallette, New Jersey. Even though I was only 3, I remember a lot about that house. The room my older brother and I shared in the rear of the house, the small kitchen, the outdoor shower, and a kid who would come play with me and my older brother in our room. Don't remember exactly what he looked like, but I remember sitting on the floor with him and my older brother. A few years later, our mother tells us that it was the ghost of a little boy, about 7 years old, who drowned about 10 years earlier. She said she and my dad and, well, my other brother just all sensed something, quote-unquote, in the house, but each thought that they were the only ones experiencing it. They were playing cards late one night. That's when they all saw something flash by, and that's when they all admitted that there was something in the house. My mom said she never felt scared or anything. She would just kind of hear me and my brother talking to someone in our room, like asking questions or seemingly answering questions from someone. I have no real memories of this, just a vague impression. The stretch is wondering if anybody by any wild chance knows about a young boy drowning in Lavallette in the late 50s, early 60s. The bungalow house was knocked down in 1970 and condos were built. Shadows move. That is, I see beings made of shadow, completely void of color, but in the shape of people. I'm aware many people claim to see them, and from what I've heard, people see them out of the corners of their eye. But not me. Oh no, I get full frontal views. They don't scare me, not even when I was a kid. There are multiple ones that come and go, and I've come to associate them with different events or happenings in my life. There are 5 that I see, varying frequencies. The tall man. Picture just a tallish guy, about 6'6". He stands tall and proud in an old suit. He's one of the 2 that I've seen cross the main field of my vision, and also one of the more frequent visitors. He pops up randomly. Not too many set rules. I tend to associate him with an ancestor, maybe my great-grandfather who's a preacher. The girl, a small, mischievous little spirit in a frilly dress. That's an acquisition from my wife, I believe. She likes to yell out, "Hey!" When no one's around, she pops up whenever her baby's about to come around the family. Last saw her about a month before my son, who's now 1, was born a few weeks early. Overcoat. This one is best described as a fat guy in a coat and a fedora. At least that's the way it's shaped. Next to the tall man, I've seen this one the longest. Comes randomly and follows me around, usually at stop signs for some reason. Mr. Box is just an ambiguous dark void with a cold presence. This is the one I've seen the least, maybe 3 or 4 times. Not enough to pick up any patterns or appearances. And finally, the man in the hat. If you've ever seen Tombstone, he looks like that. This one, I feel, is my very own personal spirit of death. Without fail, every time I see this shadow, somebody I know dies, or there's some big tragedy. I last saw him a few months ago before a friend was murdered, and before that it was every day for a solid month in 2017 in December. Or maybe October, and before the end of the year, I don't know. My grandpa, and my wife's great-grandma died. This one terrifies me more the older I get. I know it sounds crazy, but I feel crazy talking about this to anybody, but these figures are just a single facet of a life plagued by paranormal activity. Thank you for being plagued with listening to me. See ya.